Thank you. I'm glad to be here with my wife. My wife is Dr. Joanne Thompson. She brought me here. This originally, maybe it's a good thing we came now when it's raining. Maybe in early September when we planned on being here, the weather was gorgeous and everybody would be out enjoying it. Go to the first slide, please. Okay, that's me. I am a board certified gynecologist. I practiced for more than 20 years, and that's not really true because I still consult some patients. I don't do any surgery. I'm much too old for that. And when it says 35 patents, I have probably more like 40 patents. Next slide. Long ago, my partner and I'm the one without the mustache and without the baby. That's my partner, Jim Bob. And we developed the GIFT procedure, which is an infertility procedure for patients that cannot get pregnant. And what we did is we gave the patients drugs to make them develop ovum, eggs in the ovaries. And then at the proper time, we took them to surgery and surgically removed the eggs from the patient. At the same time, we had the laboratory prepare the husband's sperm with capacitation. That means give it the capacity to be able to fertilize the egg. Then we took the fertilized egg while the patient was still asleep, loaded it into a small catheter, and we loaded, first of all, the capacitated sperm, and then the eggs, and then we placed those inside the distal end of the fallopian tube. And this is a procedure that was the forerunner of in vitro fertilization. So this is a procedure that is still done today, has about a 40% success rate, but my partner and I developed it. Next slide. That's a laparoscope. What is a laparoscope? A laparoscope, women know, men probably don't. It's a little keyhole incision we put in the belly button. Then we blow up the belly with gas so we can see what's around. If you don't blow it up with gas, everything's sitting on top of each other. That's the uterus, the ovary, and the fallopian tube, so you can kind of understand what we did. Most of my inventions and patents have to do with surgical procedures and have to do with surgical instrumentation. The last patent that I wrote was 2 months ago. Even though I'll soon be 68, I'll never retire. That's just not in my blood. My wife is a professor of English and teaches English to engineers and technical writing. Next slide. Now, innovation is a very new word that you see all the time. You know, but it's like I've been doing this my whole life. The first patent that I ever wrote was issued from the United States when I was in medical school, and that was over 40 years ago. So these are laparoscopic GIFT procedure, the vaginal progesterone suppositories to make sure that the fertilized egg, the embryo, stayed in the uterus, laparoscopic appendectomy, ectopic pregnancy. These are procedures that I and my partner developed. The seasonally oral contraceptives, that's a drug. You have to be able to do both drugs and medical devices and make sure that you can get them through the FDA, which is a U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Would you have somebody cool it off a little in here? I know that when I get hot here, it's hot in the room. And it's just because of all these warm bodies. Go back one slide. So anyway, if you look at all these things, this is a continuum of what I've kind of done, and not everything, just what is interesting. 1998, the anchor port, those are laparoscopic. 1999, that's the Alura. That's when I initially invented the Alura. 2005, and that is the Alura Lux. Is this on?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. If it isn't, I won't bother using it. Anyway, I'll explain about the Alura Lux, but this is to make the Alura safer for women. Okay? Next slide. These are the 5 companies that have been founded on innovations and patents that I have. 40Js, if you look at 40Js, we'll talk about that in a minute, but that's our family company that's named after my wife, Jo, and our 4 sons whose names all start with J's. So it's 40Js. Next slide. This is a year and a half ago, and this is our family. Okay, Jo, get up and help me. Just get up and point them out.
Oh, all right. All right.
Our oldest son is Jamie.
Hang on. Where is it? This side. Here we go.
Jamie's our oldest son and looks like Joanne and is kind and has a very kind heart like Joanne. The other boys are more like me. Jamie is a biomedical engineer. He has an MBA. He is a regulatory specialist, which means he can do everything at the FDA. And he's never worked for any company other than our company. And Jamie makes most of the decisions relative to our company, okay? John is our second son. Jonathan is a surgeon. Okay, he's a general surgeon. He specializes in bariatrics. Our third son is Justin, and even though he looks like me, Justin has a heart of gold like his mother, okay? Justin is a venture capitalist, and he takes brand new companies and helps them along and loans them money. And that's what he does professionally. And then our fourth son, and the one that got married, is Jeffrey. Jeffrey has 1 degree in one degree in neuroscience from Brown, 2nd degree in a master's in drug development, and he's just finishing his PhD in drug development. When I get too old to do this, and I'm 67, I'll soon be 68, we're hoping that Jeff will come and support NH2 Global. Now this is
Jeff.
That's Jeff. Okay. Can you guys see over here which one Jeff is?
Yeah.
And then these are 7 of our 9 grandchildren. And our what? And as you can kind of tell, the one down here with the dark hair in the bottom has an attitude. Okay. Okay. Thanks. That's right. Thanks. So anyway, our new daughter-in-law is also a physician, as are members of her family. So when you look at that picture, there are, I think, 7 doctors on there. 4 of them, at the big picture, 4 of them physicians. Next picture. Okay, they wanted me to talk about aging, okay? Instead of saying aging, they're going to say women's health issues at each stage of life, okay? That's what marketers do, as they soft sell everything, okay? A woman's hormone is estrogen. Estrogen is made by the ovaries. It's not made until probably age 11, 12, 13, depending upon nutrition and country. But the estrogen level will be high pretty much until you're 30 or 35. Then the estrogen level starts to decline, and at age 50, the ovary loses the ability to make estrogen, and that's called menopause. This is all on the slide, and that's an important thing to tell you. all of these PowerPoint slides will be available. You should use them as a reference. If you have any questions about the medical references, we'll provide more medical references. It'll give you more questions. But use these, study them, share these with others so that you can use this as a tool. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've gone over this, but it's mostly estrogen. Go again, next slide. On average, 50 or 52, menopause means cessation or the stoppage of any menses. That's what we call periods. If you have estrogen, you know, that's what causes a period. When you stop having periods, that's because you produce no more estrogen. Next slide. Okay. The estrogen doesn't all of a sudden stop at age 50. It gradually declines every year from age 30 on. It's like a rheostat for the lights. You can turn them up or turn them down. Well, it's like age 30, your body's continuously turning the rheostat down on how much estrogen you make. Next slide. This is a slide to kind of burn in your mind because this explains everything. You know, this explains how come ladies, as they get older, their lips become thinner and drier and less plumpy. That's because the estrogen does that. You know, after age 50 or 55, you can have some vaginal dryness and problems from urination. That's from the decrease of the estrogen. You know, how you can have decreased sexual responses from 35 on or 30 on because of the decrease of the estrogen. You know, we can help that without giving estrogen. Next slide. Okay. All of these great numbers you see, I just explained. Even though the Alura was the very first product that NHT Global had, you know, they lost the product in 2007. Their revenues went down. And other MLMs and other distributors were selling the product. That's what my son's, Jamie's decision was. 2.5 years ago, I went to Jamie and I said, look, I'm unhappy with the current situation. I want Alura only to be sold by NHT and NHT Global. And he said, I don't want to do that. I said, well, I want you to do it. Well, it doesn't matter that much. So he said, what are you willing to do for it? And I said, well, I promise you that if you do this, I will go out and support and promote the product in our companies to make sure that your revenues, make sure that they generate enough revenues to maintain their exclusivity. So he said, okay, this is the 27th time that I've presented this year. Now, most of them were in China. The exclusivity means nobody else in the world can sell the Alura products or the new Valura products other than NHT Global. Is it important? Well, you know, in the past 2.5 years, NHT Global stock has gone from $1 a share to 50. Okay, that's how important it is. Their revenues went from $6-7 million a quarter to $80 million a quarter. That's how important it is to have an exclusive product. Next slide. Okay, what's the science? The science has to do, and I invented this back in 99, 2000. We have patents on it. It is FDA approved. It's approved in the United States, and that makes it approved worldwide for regulatory concerns. And it took lots of things to do that. How does it work? The menthol is what's called a permeation enhancer. In other words, the menthol will move the L-arginine across the tissue barrier of a woman's genital tissues, okay? And the level of menthol is designed just to do that. Now, once the L-arginine gets into the tissues, the L-arginine stimulates blood vessel growth, okay? The blood vessel growth increases the blood supply and causes engorgement and arousal for the woman. Now, we have found out that it has many more applications as a topical vasodilator. In other words, you put it on other skin, it might not be as well absorbed, but it depends upon the condition, and I'll explain that later. Keep going. Okay, so, and this was awarded the Nobel Prize in medicine and physiology, and medicine is no different than physiology. L-arginine stimulates the nitric oxide synthase system to create nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a gas, and it communicates cell to cell very rapidly, but it stimulates the production of cyclic GMP, which is a long, potent, long-acting vasodilator. You can see the two vessels, and I'll look over here for a while. Are we okay? If you look at the two vessels, the normal vessel is the smaller one, and when you dilate the vessel, it increases the amount of blood flow about 5 times. Next slide. Okay, this gets a little complicated, but I'll simplify it. There are 3 types of the nitric oxide synthase. One is in the nerves, one is in the inside lining of the blood vessels called the endothelial cells, and one is in the generalized tissue that's not really nerves and not really blood vessels. So it's the inducible nitric oxide synthase, which is 85%, which is in between the cells, that has the most response. Next slide. Okay. An improved formulation. When we originally developed and formulated the Alura back in 1999-2000, for the Food and Drug Administration, you need to have a preservative. A preservative means bacteria and fungus won't grow within your product if it's topical. We always use parabens. Parabens, years and years ago, we used to use formaldehyde. They nixed that. We use parabens, which is an antibiotic. And I didn't change the formulation in 15 years. Karen Simmons came to me and said, can you get rid of the parabens? And this was 2.5 years ago when we signed. And I said, well, yeah, we can. She said, how can you do that? I said, we already have tests that we did back in 2004, 2005, that the menthol also is an antibiotic, and the level of menthol that we use is sufficient to prevent the growth of any bacteria in the product. So we can get rid of the parabens. Well, I told her that, and she said, I said, why do you want to do this? She said, well, it'll be easier for us to market a parabens-free Alura. I said, okay. So I went back and I studied, and I started looking at, I said, how come? She said, well, it causes breast cancer. And I said, that's ridiculous. I went back and I started looking at the medical literature. There were 1 or 2 reports that there was an association between hormone disruptors and parabens. And yearly, those reports have increased. Now, this year alone, 2015, I found 15 different medical references that they have found parabens within the cancers that they remove from women. Okay, so there is an association, so this is paraben-free. Okay? So it makes sense to me now. It was done for probably the wrong reason, which is marketing, but at least it is parabens-free, and my son and I wrote a patent on it that extends this extends all of the intellectual property and the protection for our entire product line for the next like 20 years. Next slide. Okay, so what is the Lux technology? The Lux technology means we just removed the parabens and we allow the menthol to be the antibacterial agent. Now, when I say it simply, it took 6 months of laboratory testings to prove that to the satisfaction of the Food and Drug Administration. But it is patented, Food and Drug Administration approved, parabens free. Okay, keep going. Now, in the past 4 or 5 years, we've realized that the Alura, and now the Alura Lux, it's a platform technology that has multiple different uses, all because of vasodilatation and bringing more blood supply to the affected tissue, which brings more oxygen and more nutrients. Next. Okay. So the different indications are cranium. This is for headaches, and mostly menopausal headaches and migraine headaches that women get relative to menopause. Lip vasodilator, that's purely cosmetic. It's not important to me, but it's important to women sometimes. A genital vasodilator, that's why it was invented. This was invented to be the Viagra for women. Fertility vasodilator, I'll explain that in a little bit. Anal vasodilator and a cutaneous vasodilator. Next. What causes headaches? Headaches are caused by a million different things. The vast majority of headaches are caused by too little oxygen being delivered to the brain. If you place the Alura Lux on your neck, 2 different places over the stellate ganglion, that will cause the blood vessels to dilate and provide more blood and oxygen to the brain. If you put the Alura Lux in your nose, if you need to, it will increase the blood supply to the brain and increase the oxygen and decrease your headache. If it works, it works. It works for a lot of patients. I tried Tylenol first, but if that doesn't work, then I go to this. For hot flashes, Tylenol won't do you anything, but this will. Next one. Okay. You know, we have a whole series of clinicals, and that's one of the things that 40Js does and does well. All of our products are clinically proven. The Alura has 3 different clinical studies on it. The lip only has 1 clinical study because we had pictures, we only had to do 1. We will probably, I mean, my son right now, Jamie's right now working on giving you all of the different photos. But if you apply the Alura Lux twice a day, it'll probably take 2 or 3, maybe 4 weeks to show a good difference, and then you have to keep on using it every day to keep the lips plumped. Why doesn't it work in 1 week? Well, maybe your estrogen level's too low. Okay? Next slide. Next slide. But, you know, if you don't think that this is estrogen associated, go look at your mother or your grandmother. This is estrogen. Next. Okay. And first of all, our patients, we developed lots of things for our patients. And our patients knew this, okay? A lot of them were in our clinical studies. And they would come to us and they would say, you know, would you make this? And we'd say, we can't. Would you make this? Well, maybe. But when Viagra came out in the United States in 1998, they all came in and said, I want a prescription for Viagra. You know, and we'd say, well, it's not FDA approved for use in women. And they come back the next year and they'd say the same thing. After a while, they said, well, can't you all develop a Viagra for us? You know, and I thought, okay. So that's when I developed the menthol as a permeation enhancer and the L-arginine to increase the vasodilatation and to give women a clitoral erection from where they can have an orgasm. Now, it's not 100%, but it helps different patients differently. Okay, there are different components. Speed to achieve orgasm, ability to achieve orgasm, intensity of orgasm, all of these are above the baseline. Now, the baseline for women is reported as 23%. So it goes from 23% to 66, 23% to 65, but it's not 100%. Okay? Next slide. Lubrication. Lubrication is a woman's first response of arousal. Lubrication happens because the blood vessels around the outside of the vagina become dilated, they become leaky, and they leak the water component of the blood into the vagina. That's what vaginal lubrication actually is. So the vaginal lubrication has the exact same oxygen level as the blood, has the exact same albumin level, has the exact same pH, which is 7.2, as the blood. So that's what vaginal lubrication is, and you can see how that increased. Now, that's a very big thing because the vaginal lubrication will decrease as women get older. Next slide. And this is just a compendium of all of them. And this is, you know, you add them all together, 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus, you know, and it comes up to 98%. Well, that's not real science, and that's not real medicine. You know, for one person, it's going to work 98% of the time. For other people, it's not. Now, this is only one study, and we actually had 3 different studies done on Alura. One by Pfizer, the makers of Viagra, one by Durex, the makers of the condoms. You know, we couldn't really get a business arrangement with them back in 1999 and 2000. And that's when NHT Global came along and we said, fine, we'll go for this. I think this is a better business model anyway. Let's talk about this business model. NHT Global's business model is one where you make money by selling the product and then you make money on other people selling the product. That's exactly like the pharmaceutical industry. You know, every doctor is monitored on how many prescriptions he writes for a drug. That drug salesman is paid a commission on those sales. That drug salesman's regional manager is paid a commission on everybody's sales. And that regional manager and everybody else, the national sales manager is paid on everybody's productivity. You know, it's no different than the pharmaceutical industry that I'm quite familiar with. So I was comfortable with it in 2001, I'm comfortable with it now. Next slide. Now, this is even a better story. In 2004, the people at NHT Global came to me and said, why are the patients that have been infertile getting pregnant using the Alura? And I said, what? And they said, yeah, we have hundreds of pregnancies of patients that have been infertile. They can't get pregnant any other way, and they've been getting pregnant. How's that happen? You know, and I thought, you know, I should be able to figure this out. And I thought it was actually reflex ovulation. In other words, in some animal species, just the stimulation of coitus causes the ovaries to release an egg. And that's what I thought it was. And then later I kind of figured out it was the vaginal lubrication and the proteins in the vaginal lubrication and the oxygen and everything that was needed to capacitate the sperm. We had to capacitate the sperm in the laboratory before we did the gift procedure. We'd have the patients come in the day before, take their blood, spin it down, get the serum, which is a fluid component, and that's what we would use to incubate their husband's sperm the next day. And you have to incubate it for like 2 hours. Next slide. So, wait a minute, go back. Here. How come, so, sperm capacitation means dissolving the cholesterol off of the sperm. The sperm is made by the male, and it's encapsulated in cholesterol like armor. How come? Well, think about it. The sperm only have 23 chromosomes. The egg has 23 chromosomes, and when the two unite, you get a 46 chromosomal individual. So the sperm are different from every other cell in a male's body. And the male's immune system will kill the sperm unless it's protected by the cholesterol. Well, the cholesterol, once in the vagina, it takes the natural vaginal lubrication, the conception lubrication, to dissolve off that cholesterol to free up that sperm. And to give the sperm the motility to be able to swim the 7 to 9 centimeters out to where the ovary releases the egg in the distal end of the tube. Only in the distal end of the tube can fertilization occur. Okay, now go to the next one and starts the videos. If you are trying to conceive, or you have fertility challenges, or if you even have unexplained infertility, I would like to offer you hope. I'm Dr. Ron Thompson, and almost 30 years ago, my partner and I pioneered and developed the laparoscopic gift procedure. For over 30 years, I've been interested in helping women to conceive and to become mothers. Vaginal lubrication is important, and not only important, but essential for conception. It takes the normal physiologic process of the vaginal lubrication of sexual arousal for the woman to produce this lubrication to actually capacitate the sperm. The sperm capacitation from the natural conception lubrication, which is in the vagina, enables the sperm to swim the 6 to 7 inches to the end of the fallopian tube in the ampulla, the only place that conception occurs. To conceive is applied to a woman's genital region, especially the clitoris, and causes a reflex vaginal lubrication. The clinical studies show that it causes increased vaginal lubrication for 80% of all women, but 90% of women beyond the age of 30. There are only 2 days a month that a woman can conceive. Once the egg is ovulated, it's taken up by the end of the fallopian tube, the ampulla, and that's the only place that it sits for a day or two and can be fertilized by capacitated sperm. In my vast experience, most causes of infertility are because there's a little bit of a problem with a man and a little bit of a problem with a woman. Maybe the man has a decreased sperm count or increased amount of abnormal sperm. Maybe the woman has inadequate sexual arousal and inadequate vaginal lubrication. And the combination of the two of them causes the infertility. I think it's always best to correct all the factors that you can so that you optimize the chances to have a conception, because you only have a chance 2 days of every month. I would still advise having intercourse on a daily basis using the to conceive for the 2 days that you're most fertile. And you can tell that with ovulation predictor tests. Also, before any patient starts attempting to conceive, they should use the brand new sperm check that will tell if your husband has an adequate sperm count. Now, that doesn't tell if there are too many abnormal forms. It doesn't tell if the sperm are too immature. It doesn't tell if there's a chronic prostatitis, other problems, so that if you use the sperm check and he has an adequate sperm count, and you use the to conceive, and you're not pregnant within an adequate amount of time, you might want to have your husband visit a urologist for a complete workup. For all of the patients trying to conceive, I offer you hope. The hope is that you can use the to conceive to naturally and spontaneously conceive. My wife and I were in our 30s before we had any children, and we have 4. I offer you hope.
40 to 60% of all infertility, including unexplained infertility, can be attributed to the male sperm factor. Male subfertility is usually caused by too many abnormal sperm in the semen. If you suffer from male subfertility, you're not alone. As many as 4 to 5 million U.S. men suffer from male subfertility. This is usually due to varicose veins in the scrotum, called a varicocele. The varicocele causes increased heat in the testes and prevents the normal development of sperm. Surgical repair of the varicocele is the first option to improve the sperm count. An alternative to surgical varicocele is the laboratory processing of the semen sample. In this procedure, the sperm are also capacitated, or giving the capacity to swim the 6 to 7 inches to fertilize the ovum. This sperm capacitation usually occurs normally in the vagina with sexual arousal, natural conception lubrication. In 2 different infertility procedures, intrauterine insemination and in vitro fertilization, laboratory capacitated sperm is essential. Both procedures require 6 to 12 months of treatments and, depending on the woman's age, average only a 30% success rate. Now there is another option to varicocele surgery, intrauterine insemination or in vitro fertilization. This option is the natural selection and sperm capacitation with a woman's normal sexual arousal fluid in the vagina, natural conception lubrication. Natural conception lubrication from to conceive can compensate for male subfertility without surgery. Conception can be expected in 6 to 12 months, depending on the severity of the male subfertility and on the woman's age and ovulations.
You know, for the Alura to be used in China, that's a huge market now because they've just relaxed the one-child policy, and everybody in China, ladies are allowed to have 2 children or even 3. And infertility is a large problem in China. Okay, so that is the relationship between, now, we have thousands of pregnancies in NHT Global from the Alura. The next indication is usually an anal fissure or hemorrhoids that ladies get from delivering babies. This is a crack or a non-healing sore in the anus. Now, it doesn't sound like it's a very big thing, but it's very concerning for the patients and the women that have it. If you do surgery on it, the outcomes for surgery are usually miserable and they're painful. Using the Alura every day, 2 or 3 times a day, not only does it bring in a fresh blood supply, also antibacterial, prevents the infection prevents the tissue from being reinfected. So it works in 2 different ways. Especially ladies appreciate it after they've delivered and they have a fistula or a fissure. Okay, next slide. Cutaneous vasodilatation. Now, this happens to older individuals, either diabetic foot ulcer because of decreased blood vessel supply because of the diabetes, or venous stasis of the legs, which means not enough blood supply because you don't remove the venous blood. The Alura works for these. It takes 2 or 3 applications a day, but it will heal a moderate diabetic foot ulcer. A severe one that's all the way down through to the blood vessels, to the dermis, it won't heal that. You need to have skin graft. Next slide. So that's what a diabetic foot ulcer is. It's always on the toe, or it's always on the ball of the foot. That's where the blood supply is the least normally. Next. This is healing after 2 months, and that's a venous stasis ulcer of the leg. And these are actual pictures. Okay, next one. And that's healing even further. This is another patient with the same problem but higher, closer to the knee instead of down around the ankle. Next one. Oh, okay. They didn't put in some other pictures I had, but that's okay. What are the best tips for use? Well, we're going back to for fertility treatment. and they kind of mix these up. But you use it daily after shower bath for anti-aging benefits. Now, as ladies get older and they make less estrogen, you need more moisture in the vaginal tissues. If you use the Alura Lux daily after shower bath, it'll be much more effective and prevent you from needing estrogen. Use before intercourse for enhanced ability to become pregnant and for enhanced pleasure. Use on peak days for fertility. And that's, you know, that's one of the things I would tell the fertility patients. You need to keep using this every day, just not the days you're trying to get pregnant, because you have to increase the reactions of the vaginal tissues and the ability to lubricate, so you can get the lubrication, the natural conception lubrication, so that you can compensate for male subfertility by capacitating the sperm. Next slide. Okay, summary. And this is a marketing thing from Karen. Okay. And she gives you all these things, and this you can use at home. Next one. Oh, wait a minute, go back. For all stages of life. Well, children shouldn't use Alura Lux. Okay. But it's certainly beneficial beyond that. Next slide. Now we're talking about the Valura Lux. Look at the V in front of it. 2.5 years ago in Russia, you know, one of the distributors asked me, what about Valura? And they said, didn't you invent it? I said, no. They said, what do you have to do with it? I said, nothing. They said, really? I said, yep, it doesn't use any of our technology. We didn't develop it, we didn't formulate it, we didn't clinically test it. And they came back to us, Karen came back to us and said, well, can you make one using menthol and L-arginine to essentially become a Viagra for men? And I said, well, that's very difficult because the protective skin on the penis prevents the L-arginine from being driven into the tissues. I said, but we've already done it. And we did. Back in 2007, we developed a topical male cream, and she said, well, can I have it? And I said, well, it is clinically proven in 65 Chinese men, and then again in 19 Chinese men with a higher concentration. And she said, well, can I have it? Will you do it for us? And I said, you got to talk to Jamie. Any medical questions I will address if you would like. Any questions?
I think one main question from a lot of the team was, how do you apply the Valura Lux? Valura.
The Valura Lux
How does the man
is applied to the male's penis twice a day and thoroughly rubbed in. Now, what did the Valura Lux show in the test of 65 men? It showed an average increase in the size of the penis of 20%. In the 19 men, we increased the concentrations to 5 times. And in the 19 men, it showed an average increase of 30% of penis size in 2 months with daily application twice a day. And yes, it does act Viagra-like.
And the other question was...
Wait a minute, you only get one. Next. I said a question. Next.
Well, I asked a good few people, you know, what questions would they have, and I have them all here.
You only get one.
Okay.
Pick the best one.
Okay. Once opened, how long does it work at its best?
It can stay. I have forever. I have Alura from 17 years ago that's still good. And everybody wants to know how come it's still good, because the menthol is so stable, the L-arginine is so stable, and bacteria can't grow in it because of the menthol.
One question for...
Wait a minute, that was it.
Does it help with endometriosis?
What?
Does it help with endometriosis?
No. Nothing helps with endometriosis other than birth control pills will prevent it from growing. A laser laparoscope, you can burn it out. There are some very terrible drugs, okay, that we can give patients to prevent any estrogen from being made, any progesterone from being made, but we only give them for like 3 months at a time, okay? And they're shots, okay? And that's what helps with endometriosis. Alura does nothing for endometriosis. Next, wait a minute, let's go to this side.
What's the success rate for atrophic vaginitis?
What?
For atrophic vaginitis, what's the success rate?
Atrophic vaginitis. The vaginal tissues and all of a woman's genital tissues depend upon estrogen as support. Just as your car will not run without gasoline in it, it takes estrogen for a woman's genital tissues to become thick and luscious and like they're meant to be in the ages of 20 and 30. Okay? Now, what treats atrophic vaginitis? And they're trying to give it a new name now. Estrogen. Topical estrogen will always treat atrophic vaginitis and atrophic vulvitis. What is an alternate? An alternate is Replens, which is a non-estrogen lubricant, okay? Now, if you use the Alura twice a day, morning and night, it will cause the vaginal lubrication that works exactly like the Replens. So, does the Alura work for atrophic vaginitis and vulvitis? Yes, but not as well as estrogen. But it works without estrogen. Next question. Over here. Lady in the back.
I'm just interested in the low motility rate or morphology in
Wait a minute. I can't hear you.
the low motility or morphology. How does it help to get the sperm?
No, I mean, we got plenty of them there, okay? They're 250 million per cc. If it's not a decreased sperm count, you know, what? If you get a decreased sperm count, you might need some andrology.
What level would
Wait a minute. I can't hear you.
Sorry, what level would the decreased sperm count be?
You know, if you have a sperm count at 50,000 per cc, okay, you know, you have good chances with the Alura Lux working. If it ranges down to 10 million per cc, or I mean, if it ranges down to 10,000 per cc, you're probably not going to have much luck, and you need to have andrology and then have IUI. Are you a physician? Oh, okay, but close. Just don't come at us down there with those needles. Okay, who's next?
Contraindications, any?
Please?
Contraindications, any, in regards to using the products?
None. And that's why it's FDA approved. It should not be used any place close to the eyes, okay, and it says that on there. Ladies who are in their 3rd trimester of pregnancy should not use it either, because, you know, the Alura Lux will cause orgasms, which sometimes can go into preterm labor, okay? So other than that, there are no contraindications.
Does it work for hot flushes?
Not much.
Okay.
Okay.
Last question.
Just in terms of a natural product,
What?
I know you're saying it's a natural product. What is the source of the ingredients like the menthol and the...
I have no idea, but they are natural. Okay? The L-arginine's natural and the menthol's natural. Okay? And quite frankly, neither are petroleum products. If you really want to look at chemicals, you know, they talk about petroleum products and non-petroleum products. These are both non-petroleum plant-based products. And that's as far as I can go on this natural stuff, okay? Next.
How has it been received in the medical community, and what kind of, has there been many articles and so forth in medical journals?
None. I made the decision in 2000 when we got the FDA approval they sent me a letter, and it had on the bottom of it, check which one you want, over the counter or prescription. Okay? I checked over the counter. That's what allows all of you to sell this over-the-counter medical device to anybody. If I would have checked prescription only, and I could have, then we would have doctors. We would go out and pay for a pharmaceutical company to market it. We would go out and have multiple studies done on it. We would go out and, pay the commissions to all the sales reps for the doctors. So we have none of that, and I won't allow any of that. Do we have internal studies? Yes. Those aren't available to you.
Sorry, can you not just take A13? Like you're talking about.
Take what?
You're talking about the lack of estrogen as being a marketing tool for your product.
No, I'm not.
No, well, it comes into your discussion a lot.
As estrogen decreases, I tell you this, just because it decreases on the lips, decreases on the vagina and the vaginal tissues, and might compensate and save you from using estrogen. Estrogen is the key. It's the only thing to replace estrogen back. Now, you don't have to take it orally. You can use estrogen topically. It works.
I use it all the time.
Right. If it takes that level to satisfy you, as far as those tissues needing to grow thick enough, that's what it's going to take, and no, the Alura is not going to do it for you.
Yeah, but it also protects my heart and it increases my brain power and it's good for my skin. It's good for a whole lot of other things.
I wouldn't know. I'm just telling you. I'm just a simple doctor. I don't need that. Any other question? Any questions?
Can a woman use Valura?
Wait a minute.
Can the woman use Valura?
Valura? No, it's much too strong. Okay?
Who has a question?
In medical, the Valura is not really Valura. You can use that. The Valura Lux really is not. It just like just like Viagra is only approved for men. The Valura Lux will only be approved for men. Okay? It's 5 times too strong for women, and I guarantee you it will burn you. Okay? Okay? You're welcome. Now, okay, one more.
For my daughter.
Is she here?
No.
Okay.
Period. She's at a match where I should be, and I'm here instead.
Okay, what's the question?
Period pains. Does it work?
No. No. You might want to think it does, but it doesn't. I'll tell you what will work. Okay? Period pain is something called dysmenorrhea. It means pain with periods. Okay? And it's caused by prostaglandins in the uterus as the uterus contracts. And usually it happens on younger women who've never delivered a baby. Okay? Now, if they take, first of all, if they take Motrin, ibuprofen is an over-the-counter drug. Advil, okay. If they take that 2 or 3 times a day for the 3 days before they start their period, that'll prevent the prostaglandins that cause the pain from being made. Okay? Number 2, if that doesn't work, then they need to go on birth control pills, and that will decrease the flow, okay? And that will help with the pain. If that doesn't help, if those 2 things don't help, they need to be checked for endometriosis. Okay? That's your last question, because that was 3 of them. Who's next? If there are no other questions, thank you. There you go.